This is Day.
Getting no hit is never pretty hard to put a positive spin on it.
On Sports Radio 950 KJR.
We have to give credit to their guy, Turnbull. He was ahead in the count all night. He really was.
With Nathan Bishop from domeandbedlam.com.
There were some pitches, in the middle of the plate that we did not square up.
And Chris Crawford of NBC Sports Edge.
Quite frankly, we have to be better than that.
Here's Ian Furness.
All right, here we go. It is, not a Molly-Whopping Monday. It's not even a Molly-Whopping Wednesday, although the alliteration would sound good. It's a special emergency session with the Molly-Whoppers themselves. Chris Crawford, Nathan Bishop, and Kevin Shockey are here. Yeah, so the second time the Mariners have been no-hit this season, but there's a bigger picture issue here that we need to get to, and that's why we're going to have the guys join us today. Holy smokes. Nathan, let me start with you, my friend. What the hell is going on with this baseball team? Is there cause for great concern, or are no-hitters just the norm here, my friend?
Well, I think, and there was some discussion on this last night, Ian, I don't think that the no-hitters in and of themselves are the big concern. That somebody was pointing out that the 95 Dodgers had almost the exact same thing happen, and then they went on and won their division. That was a great team. So you can look at the no-hitters as more of a statistical anomaly than anything else. I think the big concern is that they almost got no hit last week, too. And there are multiple games a week, it seems like, where we go through the fifth inning or more and start having to crank up the no-hitter alert button because it's not just that they've been no-hit 2 times. It's that this offense is so anemic and such a craptastic meringue that we're constantly worried that they could get no hit on any given day. And it's, to be frank, I cannot believe they're 21-22. It feels like a 2-8 or 1-9 stretch has been lurking over the horizon this entire year. But to their credit, they're just one game under 500.
Nathan, of course, Dome and Bedlam, and Chris Crawford joining us, NBC Sports Edge. General thoughts before we move into specifics from you, Chris.
Well, I mean, look, sometimes you just run into elite pitchers like John Means and Spencer Turnbull, and these things are going to happen. This is a bad offensive team. I mean, I was just looking at the numbers before, and you're probably going to go over them, but just real quick, 199 team batting average. And if you're not a fan of team batting average, 280 on base percentage. That's disgusting. That's reprehensible for a major league team. I understand that in today's game, batting averages are going to be much lower. I believe the league leader right now is 267. 267 used to be what utility hitters hit. That's the Mendoza line has been moved down quite a bit over the last few years. But give credit to Spencer Turnbull, but that was a very, very bad offensive performance last night.
And we, in full transparency, just with some schedules, we are taping this at 10 a.m. this morning. So who knows what may happen? We'll get into that in just a second. Not just today, but maybe down the road as well. I mean, this is one of those nights where, I know our morning guy was calling for the head of the hitting coach with Chuck Powell. When Chuck Powell takes to Twitter, and I'll just kind of put some context in this, Kevin, you can add to this. Our morning show host, Chuck Powell, who is Mr. Baseball Guy himself, he tweets the opposite side of softy. So if you think like the far right and you think the far left, okay, that's how polar opposite they are. And I look at, and Chuck Powell's on a rant, Kevin, last night. Fire somebody, get rid of somebody. I don't know if one game is that. It's a bigger picture issue, but your thoughts, Kev, before we move on to some specifics.
I mean, it's just so it's really, really embarrassing to watch it. And they're just not throwing out any remotely close to acceptable lineup. And that's the problem. And I mean, look, we've all looked at it and seen it. And, Kyle Seager's a good hitter, and even he's not hitting much this year, but overall he's been hitting well, except for not getting a lot of hits is what I'm trying to say. Sure. Seager's been pretty good. Haniger's been very good. And then everything else is just, what are we even doing here? And that's, I don't know. I know people want to, sacrifice chickens, or they want to fire people, or they just don't have guys that can hit. And I just don't see, I don't know, Tim Laker. Last night, Mitch Haniger sung his praises and said, look, he works harder than anybody, and he's been a big help to us to this point. What does that mean they would do without him? I don't know. I don't want to see it. I'm not sure what the solution is here. I don't love firing people just for the sake of firing people. I don't love flipping over tables just for the sake of flipping over tables. I like the idea of trying to say, this is the bet that they made coming into this season. I'm sorry, you have to lie in it.
And that's a good point. All right, I want to start at the top in a second. When I say that, I want to start with Dipoto and work our way down, and we'll get down. And Tim Laker, the hitting coach, is third on the list probably in this regard. But let's start first. Chris, I'll let you kind of have the say here. 2015, we had a similar pattern of no-hitters. So that was 6 years ago. In between there's been variances. There's been like a couple here, maybe a handful there. Now we've seen this massive amount this year in the early part of the season. I'll let you kind of, because I know you were into this last night, Chris. How big a deal is a no-hitter? How concerning is a no-hitter? Not just a no-hitter once, but twice in a year, or is it just becoming commonplace and it's just like getting shut out? Who cares?
It's becoming it's somewhere in between that for me. So there's definitely a gray area, and I was actually talking on Twitter to Softy about this a little bit. Is that there has to be context. There have been no hitters where I've seen people walk 8 guys. There have been no hitters where I've seen people allow 4 runs. That's just how old I am. But it's a case where for a team, look, you get no hit. It doesn't really matter if you get 3 hits, 5 hits, 7 hits. If you don't score runs, you don't score runs. So it's certainly frustrating, but you should be much more concerned about the fact that they're just not scoring runs, and that it has to do with the fact that there are automatic outs in this lineup. And when you have automatic outs in this lineup, when you're only getting on base 7 out of 25 times, which is what they're doing right now, that's going to happen. I mean, they are going to be a team that flirts with no hitters until there is an actual complete lineup. And even when Ty France comes back, and even when Evan White comes back, this is not going to be a very complete lineup. It's concerning, but this is just kind of a punctuation point on a very bad offensive team.
If your lineup, if we're talking about a lineup for a baseball team, and the phrase "when Evan White comes back" is used as anything in a positive sense, then listen, you're just done. You might as well just say, "Hey, can we apply for what used to be the PCL and move down to that league and get relegated?" Because that's the kind of hitter you are. Kevin, you want to add something?
Remember, this is a team that scored 7 runs on 3 hits, by the way.
Yeah,
it's not all about hits.
And Kevin, explain the significance of that, because that was historical.
Well, yeah, that had, I believe, that happened one other time before, or 0 times. I don't remember exactly.
Once, I think it was once in the 30s or 20s or whatever.
So they scored 7 runs on 3 hits, but they were also getting on base for that. They weren't getting on base last night either.
No,
so
they had the walk and a fielder's choice, and thanks for coming. All right, Nathan, let me go back to you, Nathan Bishop, Bedlam. Let's start at the top, because you mentioned something last night. I'm with you, man. Like, enough. Like, at some point, when are we going to play relevant games? But let's start with Dipoto, because it is year 6, right? I think we're in year 6. Am I right on that? Am I right on the numbers? It feels like it's longer than that with Dipoto, but year 6. It feels as if there is young talent in the system, but it also feels like he massively, and we've talked about this, but I want you to get into specifics and explain to folks about this. It feels like Dipoto really put his team, and I think his hitting coach and his manager, in a really bad situation this year, whether it was his decision or not. But this lineup, as Kevin said, had too many holes, and it's not just because of youth.
Well, I think, and that's part of the job, too, as a general manager. Whatever is or is not his actual fault, it's kind of like the on-field manager. It's his job to take the responsibility for what's going on the field as an organization. And my position on Dipoto for a while now has been that I don't think that he's the reason that the Mariners are the Mariners. I think that this past offseason and Kevin Mather and John Stanton's incompetence and rank disregard for the fans and the on-field product is pretty clearly the primary issue. I don't think that the ownership for the Mariners is alone in that regard. I think there are plenty of major league ownerships that are really terrible and largely indifferent towards the on-field product. So when we look at, and just to throw out a couple examples, I would throw out Tampa and Oakland as 2 of those. And those are 2 organizations whose front offices have figured out a way to year in and year out provide a really quality and enjoyable big league product. The entire time that Dipoto has been here, I feel as though the situation has been marked as though whatever's happening on the field is due to either something that he inherited in the past or in expectation of something that's going to come into the future. And I think that you can get away with that here and there. He did come into a situation with a very bad farm system in 2016. He also came into it with a nearly playoff ready core in place. They failed to make that next step. step, which was probably his mandate when he was hired to get the team to the playoffs, then pivoted to a full-on rebuild, which of course he didn't term it that. He called it a step back. And now we're in year 3 of that, kind of DePoto 2.0. And I think in the broader context as a Mariners fan, we're on this 20-year playoff-less streak, but also within the DePoto regime, I think he's an adequate major league executive. I think that he's done some good things. I think that he's gotten, by and large, a huge pass on a lot of the things that he's done that have not worked. The Chris Taylor trade, the Omar Narvaez trade looks terrible right now. The guy's absolutely crushing it in Milwaukee, while this team's catchers have a WRC plus, which is just a measure of offensive skill, that's at 47. That's the same as 2015 Mike Zunino when he almost crashed out of the big leagues. So I think as a fan, I think it's just time to, when we see this happen on the field day in and day out, and when a lineup comes out here that has 1/3 of the roster being an automatic out, at what point can we look at the general manager and say, this is on you? It's no longer acceptable for this to be this way. And maybe we're not there yet, but I sure think we need to be getting close if we're not.
Chris, how much of that is what we've discussed before is you knew you had some young guys coming in, you knew you had some holes in the lineup, but you as a general manager, you as an organization, did not go out there and help piece together or put together a couple spots, that would at least be adequate, in terms of a lineup, at least be competent major league players that don't cost you a fortune, but you would have had to spend a little bit of money along the way, and they had complete reluctance to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, some of this is, Jerry DePoto assumed, I'm assuming that he's assuming that Dylan Moore was for real, that Dylan Moore was going to be part of this offensive upswing for the team, and that obviously has not worked out.
But let me stop you there. Was there anything that would tell you study the guys coming up? Sure. You study the guys, that's your job. Was there anything that would tell you that would be the case?
I didn't think he was going to be this bad, but there was nothing that suggested to me that he was an 800 OPS hitter. Like that was such a small sample, and everything he's done before suggested that this was a Willie Bloomquist type player, and that's more insult than compliment. Sorry, Willie Bloomquist, if you're listening today in Port Orchard, but it's just a case where the Mariners assumed that Dylan Moore was going to be at least a 750 type OPS player that could play all over the field and provide some decent defense. He can do everything but the 750 OPS. They assumed Evan White was going to be a much better player in his second year. That's obviously been a tremendous failure. I really hope that he goes to AAA when he's ready, because he needs to go back to his old swing. But yeah, this is a case where I wrote about this for Vice a few years ago, and I got yelled at pretty bad. But the title of the article, and I titled the article, was that the Mariners are screwed. And the reason the Mariners were screwed at that point was because they were too good to start this whole rebuild thing that they finally started, but they were too bad to actually compete with the Oaklands and Houstons. And now we're paying that price. I mean, this is the you see it talked about all the time on Twitter about rebuild, how this is the first official rebuild. Well, yeah, that's true, but they've really not committed to winning. So it just kind of depends on what your definition of a true rebuild is. And right now, the Mariners are taking their lumps. It's so funny we're talking about this like they're one game under 500, but it's going to be a while before you see this team be competitive. All
right, let me swing up to Kevin, and I'll have come back through with the same question. Hitting coach and manager. Let's just start with the manager. I mean, I don't know where it comes, Kevin, but you and I are running joke on the radio when we do the headlines every day. Who's starting tonight in their 6-man rotation when they really legitimately have? I guess right now they've got 4 guys, right? They got 4. I mean, yeah. Sheffield, Dunn, Kikuchi.
We're not having this emergency session because of the pitching, though.
And Gilbert, but I bring that up because of that. I'm not talking about the pitching.
Yeah.
But
sure.
So Kevin, I'll start with you. Scott Service, whether it's him or DePoto, that dictates this stupid 6-man rotation, which means you're getting a bullpen session every 6 days. You only have 4 guys anyway. I don't quite get that, but let's start there. Service or the hitting coach, who's culpable? Anybody?
Well, I will briefly. I'll say that the 6-man rotation is definitely on DePoto too. That's a DePoto decision. I have significant questions about the control the zone philosophy. And now look, I think in general, if you're controlling the zone, what should that mean? That you're aware of what the strike zone is, you're working it, you're swinging at really good pitches, and you're not swinging at bad pitches. But here's the other thing.
Okay, that sounds like the dumbest thing in the world for this reason. it's like water's wet. Extra points are easy when they were back in the day from 20 yards out. I mean, it just, 4th and 1, go power, handoff up the middle. I mean, my God, that's just the dumb. Is he trying to outsmart himself? You're not the smartest guy in the room.
Well, I mean, this has been their philosophy for a very long time. And I was just looking this up. Here's the other problem with that. Okay, so let's say that you're doing all of that well, right? Let's say you're only swinging at good pitches, you're not swinging at bad pitches. Well, they only have one player on their roster who Baseball Savant considers on the good side of whiff percentage. So when they are swinging, they're missing. Okay? Now, again, this all does go back to the guys that are actually swinging the bat. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, if you have this philosophy, then you have to be able to do that next step, even if you're good at the philosophy that they're giving you. Okay, and I just don't see that they are. So, and I think that's, frankly, I think it's Dipoto, but service is a part of that too. Maybe we need to teach a little bit of aggression. Let's go.
All right, because as I was saying that, because I don't want to run out of time, but so you're back on it. It is a Dipoto issue more than as a service issue and a hitting coach issue. Yes, Kevin? Am I?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
If we're going in the order, yeah. Nathan, you were nodding your head. Control the zone. Ryan Davis had a great little tweet thing today, basically backing them up for this philosophy. I just think it sounds goofy. It sounds obvious to me. Swing at good pitches, of course, right? But easier said than done. Nathan, your thoughts, and let's walk down the aisle of 1, 2, 3. Who is most culpable here, and how much the other two guys are, along with the control of the zone.
Sure. If we're talking as far as who I'm holding responsible for the offensive struggles, I think that I've already probably been pretty clear that I think it's a roster construction issue. I agree with what Kevin said earlier. I think this is a talent issue more than anything. As far as the control the zone or the dominate the zone or whatever term they've decided to use this year on their T-shirts to get themselves hyped up, to be perfectly honest, a lot of this stuff is just like old baseball knowledge that's been rebranded and repackaged to get the players behind it. Players will rally around an easily repeatable phrase. I don't actually hold Scott Service particularly responsible, and that's as somebody who has not been his biggest fan over the years. I think that he actually has done a fairly good job with this clubhouse, which is one of the two things I think a manager can really be responsible for. We see the opposite over in Chicago right now with Tony La Russa, and he has absolutely gotten his players to buy in. He's also, I think, managed this bullpen really well. He's gotten a lot out of a lot of guys that Chris and I spent time on this show ragging on before the season even started. In a lot of ways, that's what's holding this team's record up. So, and as far as Tim Laker, look, Chris would have a better idea than I would. From everything I understand, I don't know how you can narrow down how a hitting coach is succeeding or failing. This feels like the easiest fall guy situation in the world, where if Tim Laker loses his job because Jose Marmoleos can't hit, and because Evan White can't hit, and because all these other guys who have never hit aren't hitting, I just don't really know where to go. I think it's by and large a roster construction issue. And obviously, if the ball is in the strike zone and you got a hitter's count, swing away and hit it hard and call it control the zone or elevate and celebrate or whatever you
Yeah.
Chris, I'll let you have basically the final word here as to if we're elevating and controlling and what T-shirt phrase we're going to put on next week.
Boy, I wish the Mariners were as good at baseball as they are at slogans. I'll just tell you that much, because they're really good at this. CS Rise. CS get a dang hit would be really nice for a logo too. To answer the question though, this is on the roster construction and the old player development system. Look, it's not nice to say, but they were the laughingstock of baseball. With this group under Jurenzik and before McKay and these guys came in, they were as bad at player development as anybody. And right now, you're seeing on offense, especially, you're seeing that they just don't have a lot of depth in this organization. And until they're willing to pay for more depth in this organization, you're going to see stuff like this happen.
Kevin, what box of T-shirts are you going to have in your office here in the next couple of weeks? We got some cool ones that Kraken sent us, or that Seattle, I should say, for the Kraken. So
yeah, nice. I could send out our home of the Kraken. Maybe should we send the Mariners our home of the Kraken T-shirts?
I think they're good.
Hey, it can't hurt, right?
Well, it makes about as much sense as controlling the zone. Swinging good pitches. Hey, swinging good pitches. I could have sworn my CYO coach at Our Lady of Fatima said, "Hey, swing at better pitches."
Yeah,
like swing at a good pitch. Oh, okay. Well, all right. Yeah, that's seems to be obvious.
Yeah.
All right, fellas, we'll table it from there. Monday we'll have our normal bi-weekly Monday session. By then, we'll have start number 2 for Logan Gilbert, as we are a hockey station now. So
Nice.
Logan Gilbert will have his second start, and we'll have a few more games, including the last game of the Detroit series under our belts. And we'll see if they're controlling the zone better or how that 6-7 might be a 7-man rotation by then. Who knows? We'll see.
Okay, over under 10.5 hits between now and Monday. Chris?
Over, barely.
Ooh, look at the confidence. Nathan?
Well, how many games do they have? Tuesday? It's Thursday an off
That's
day.
4 games, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thursday's an off day, right?
If it's 4 games, I'm taking the over. If it's 3, I'm taking the under.
All right, what a mess.
Fellas, real quick. Nathan, where can we find your work at?
Sure, I write at Mariners blog, domeandbedlam.com. If you want to follow my ramblings on Twitter, I'm at Nathan_H_B.
He almost tweeted as much as Chuck Powell last night. Chris, you?
Crawford_MILB for the Twitter, NBC Sports Edge, and also the Circling the Bases podcast. You can find it anywhere. I have Michael Bauman coming on, and we're going live on Twitch at 4 p.m. Pacific, so that'll be fun.
Ooh.
All right, well, be careful on the Twitch. Guys, take care. We'll see you on Monday, all right?
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
guys.
Thanks, guys.